Shalom Aleichem, welcome to this Shiur in Likkutei Sichos, Chelek Yud Aleph, Parshas Terumah, Sicha Aleph. This is the Iyun Shiur, the in-depth Shiur. My name is Shalom Kesselman from Los Angeles, and let's get right into it. The Nakuda of the Sicha is to explain the idea of Terumas HaAdonim and Terumas HaMishkan, Beruchnius B'nefesh HaAdam. And there is an amazing Chiddush in this Sicha, and to really appreciate this Chiddush, it's important first to take a step back and to look at earlier sources, some earlier Maramekaimis and Chassidus in Likkutei Sichos, where these inyanim are discussed. And then when we come back to our Sicha, we will see the Chiddush here and appreciate the Chiddush of this Sicha over previous Maramekaimis. So the first place that we're going to look is in the Maimer Hayesheves Beganim Tavshin Ches from the Likkutei Rebbe. The Maimer is mentioned in our Sicha in Ha'ara 13. And there the Likkutei Rebbe says as follows. V'ha'adonim heim shel kesef. The Adonim were made from silver. Dinyone ba'avoida kesef hu koisef u'tshuka. And in avoida kesef is the idea of desire. V'adnei kesef, and the Adonim, which were made from kesef, hu ha'adnus v'ha'toikef ala tshukos v'ha'koisvim. This is the adnus, the mastery and the strength that one has over their desires. Their yesod from Mishkan is as man is an odin after tshukos unutzoinas. The foundation of the Mishkan is that one must be a master over their desires. V'bederach kabbalas oil kenoida. And this is with kabbalas oil. V'zehu yesod ha-Mishkan. This is the yesod. So what is he saying in the Maimer Hayesheves Beganim Tavshin Ches? That the Adonim represent the avodah of kabbalas oil, of adnus, of mastery, of toikef, of strength. And they're made from kesef, representing the tshukos and the taivos that are not good. And what's the idea of the Adonim b'nefesh ha'adam, ba'avodah, is being a master over one's ritzonos, using kabbalas oil, using the strength of kabbalas oil to rein in and control one's tshukos and ritzonos. So this is the first idea that we see in the Maimer Tavshin Ches. Then we have a Sicha in Chelek Aleph, Parshas Terumah, and there the Rebbe builds on this idea, and he also talks about how the Adonim were the foundation, and in Avodah that represents Shiflus and Bitul, and he explains that for this reason, when it came to the Terumas HaAdonim, everybody gave the same. Everybody gave a machzis hashekel. Ha'oshi lo yarbe, v'adal lo yamit. There was no hischalkus. There was no differences. Everybody had to give the same amount, machzis hashekel. Why is that? Because since we're dealing with an avodah of bitul and shiflus and kabbalas oil, which is the foundation of everything, but in this avodah, everybody is the same. There's no hischalkus. Where is there a difference between one person and the next? When we're dealing with the koiches pnimiyim of seichel umidus, here, no two people are the same. But in bitul v'kabbalas oil, in shiflus, here, everybody's b'shaveh. So for this reason, when it came to the Terumas HaAdonim, everybody gave the same machzis hashekel. Masha'enken, he goes on to say, the Terumas HaMishkan, which was when they gave all the rest of the materials for the Mishkan, Zav, Kesef, Nachoshes, Tcheles, Argomon, and from this, the rest of the Mishkan was built. The Kroshim, the Urias, that all came from Terumas HaMishkan. There was beferish differences. Some people gave more, some people gave less, some gave Zav, some gave Kesef, some gave Tcheles, because there we're dealing with an avodah takeh mitzad koiches pnimiyim, mitzad seichel umidus. The Kroshim, he says, are 10 amos keneged the 10 koiches hanefesh. The Ariyos are the makifim. And here there is his chalkus, and therefore people gave different things. And he connects this, and this is a very important point, he connects it in the Sikh and Chelek Aleph to the two parts of davening. We begin davening with Maida Ani and Haidu, and then we move on to Psukei de Zimra, Birchas Krishma, Krishma and Shmeina Esrei. So Maida Ani and Haidu, which is the simple Haida'ah, the Bitul, the Kabbalas oil, that is the inyan of Terumas HaAdonim. And there everybody's the same. And the rest of davening, Psukei de Zimra and Krishma and Shemona Esrei, this is the idea of Trumas HaMishkan, from which the Kroshim and the Urias were made, the idea of utilizing one's Koiches Pnimiyim, Seichel Midas to serve Hashem, and there was his Chalkus. Now in that Sikh in Parshas Terumah Chelek Aleph, he does not address the prat that the Trumas Ha'adonim was given from Kesef. Doesn't address it. He just addresses the fact that everybody gave the same amount. But why Kesef? So in the Maimer Tavshin Ches we saw a reason. Kesef represents the Ritzainus of Olam Hazeh. But in Parshas Kisisa, also Chelek Aleph, page 181, there he adds another explanation as to why the Machzis HaShekel for Trumas Ha'adonim was Kesef. And he explains like this: Machzis HaShekel hat man gedarft geben Kesef dafke und nit kein Shove Kesef. They gave silver and not anything else that was Shove Kesef. Weil an Avodah shemit ad etzem haneshama, was in dem is nitok in chilukim, darf sein von Kesef dafke, matbeya shechor iflotzeis by allem and gleich. The difference between Kesef and Shove Kesef, anything else of value, is when we talk about anything else of value, Zav, Nachoshes, Tcheles, Argama, and all of the rest of the materials of the Mishkan, which are Shove Kesef, these things mean different things to different people. Some people want one more than the other. Some people value one more than the other. So when we deal with Shove Kesef, it's not the same by everybody. But Kesef, we know, silver is a matbeya shachar iflotze. Silver is the going currency. This is the primary currency. It's what everybody uses to buy and sell. It's money. And money by everybody has the same value. $1 is $1. There's no chiluk in kesef. There's no difference the way one person values kesef to the way somebody else values kesef. So here we see that not only is the idea of giving machzis hashekel for the adonim, not only is everybody giving the same amount, the same machzis hashekel, the same amount, but everybody also had to give kesef, which is a material which everybody values the same way. Once again highlighting the fact that this is an avodah in which everybody is the same. This is the bittul, the kabbalah soil, the shiflus, mitadatzim haneshama, where there is no hischalkus. So this is the way it's explained in Chelek Aleph. Now, in Chelek Gimel, Parshas Vayakel, the Rebbe begins also by saying this, page 932, Und weil die Adonim seinen Nora Yesoid und Aschole bebinyan HaMishkan, in Avodas HaAdam, die Beginne von Kabbalas Oil von Moida Ani, noch fahren Dabnen. So he once again explains that what's the idea of Trumas HaAdonim, Ba'avodah B'nefesh HaAdam. It's the idea, it's the Beginne of Kabbalas Oil, it's Moida Ani. That's what he begins in that Sikha. But then, in the very end of the Sikha, it seems like he kind of changes tracks and gives another slightly different explanation into Trumas HaAdonim. And that's because he anticipates their question. He doesn't ask the question directly, but he anticipates the question. And that is that according to what we're saying, that Trumas HaAdonim is the avodah of bittul v'kabbalas soil v'shiflus, which is b'shaveh by everybody. So why would it be then that who gave the machzis hashekel? Who gave it? We know. Only anoshim iben chaf, only adult men. L'chayra, if this is an avodah which isn't by everybody the same, it should be given by everybody, including women and children. So, for this reason, in Chelek Gimel, it seems like the Rebbe at the end of the Sikha slightly changes what the avodah of Trumas HaAdonim is. And here's what he says. Before one comes to the two avodas mentioned before in the Sikha, of Kol Masecha Oil L'Shem Shamayim and B'chol Darchecha De'eyu, is Donach Afriya Diker Avodah. There is first an avodah which has to come before. And what's that? Zugreiten sich alle seine Koiches zu Avodas Hashem in die Beidei Fanim Hanal. One has to prepare, this is the Lashon, one has to prepare all of his Koiches to the Avodas Hashem in these two ways of Kol Masecha Oil L'Shem Shamayim and B'chol Darchecha De'eyu, bis zum Iker B'Shleimus HaTikun, until one comes to the Iker and Shleimus, as Olvern B'Shachanti, der Etzem de L'Mayla Kaviyachol, B'Seicham in Toichias Etzem de L'Mata, until we reach the goal, the Shleimus, of the avodah, which is to be mamshich the etzem de l'mayla in the etzem de l'mata. And therefore darf die Zugreitung kommen mitzad etzem hanashama de l'mata, was in dem seinen alle gleich. For this reason, the preparation to the avodah of kol masacha yul Shem Shemaim and b'chol derech eyu, that preparation has to come mitzad the etzem de l'mata, because we're trying to bring a likus into the etzem de l'mata. So therefore it has to come from the etzem hanashama, which in this everybody is the same. And two, geton werden in alle koiches. It has to be done within all of the koiches. Das heißt, der Chazab was hot alle koiches begolui, and it has to be done by those by whom all the koiches are begolui. Und therefore können mit sei arbeiten und sei zugreiten. And therefore such a person who by him the koiches are begolui, he could work to prepare his koiches for the idea of a shachanti b'soichem, that the etzem de l'mayla should be nimshach lamata. And therefore he goes on to say that that's why the Vayiten es Adonov, the Adonim, they were made nor from the Terumah from Ben Esem Shana V'mayla, V'sah ben alle koiches begoli. The Terumas Adonim was only given by those who are from age 20 and up and men, because by them the koiches are begoli. But at the same time, alle Terumas for the Adonim seien gleich. Everybody gave the same machzis hashekel. So what's the beer that he's giving in Chelek Gimel? Slightly different to what he was saying in Chelek Aleph. In Chelek Aleph, he was saying simply that Terumas Ha'adonim is bittul v'kabbalah soil. It's maidani, it's hoidu. And that's what he starts to say in Chelek Gimel. But that wouldn't explain why it's only given by Anoshim miben Chof. So therefore in Chelek Gimel, he says, I think a new word, slightly different. And what does he say? That Terumas Ha'adonim is really the avodah of preparing one's koiches, zugreiten sich in alle seine koiches, preparing your koiches to be ready for the avodah of kol masacha yil Shem Shemaim and b'chol derech eyu, which is mamshich the etzem de l'mayla in the etzem de l'mata. And since we're dealing with an avodah that is to prepare one's koiches for this hamshacha, therefore mitzad echad, who can do it? Only anoshim miben chof, who by them the koiches are begoloi. Somebody who doesn't have their koiches pnimiyim begoloi, somebody whose seichel and midas are not fully developed, it's not shaykh to say that they have an avodah to prepare their koiches pnimiyim for a hamshacha milamayla, because their koiches pnimiyim are anyways not developed. So dafke anoshim miben chof, who by them the koiches are begoloi, they can do this avodah of the adonim. This is the avodah of the adonim, which is preparing their koiches to be ready for this hamshacha milamayla v'shachanti b'seicham. But on the other hand, within those people, everybody gave the same machzis hashekel, and it was kesef, as we said before, because we have to deal with an avodah which is coming mitzad the etzem hanashama de l'mata, in which everybody is the same, because only through this can we be mamshich the etzem de l'mayla in the etzem de l'mata. So this is the biur in Chelek Gimel. So it comes out, just to summarize, that we have three different hezberim in Chassidus as to the Terumas Ha'adonim, what it is ba'avodah. According to the Frierdiker Rebbe in Tafshin Ches, it's the adnus v'toikef that one has to have, the mastery and the control and the reining in of one's kesef, koisef, tshuka, rutzoinus, taivus. It's controlling that. So the kesef represents the taivus of Olam Hazeh, and the Terumas Ha'adonim is the adnus, the control over that, through Kabbalah soil. Then we have the biur in Chelek Aleph of Likkutei Sichos, that Terumas Ha'adonim is hoidu and moida ani. It's the simple avodah of bitul v'shiflus v'kabbalah soil, in which everybody's the same. And according to that, why is it kesef? Why is it kesef? So we said because it's a matbeya shacharif lotzeis, everybody values kesef in the same way. So it adds to the fact that it's b'kol echad b'shabbat. And then we have a new biur in Chelek Gimel in the end, where he's bringing up the point that who's giving Terumas Ha'adonim only anoshim miben chof, and he's explaining that what is the avodah of Terumas Ha'adonim? It's preparing the koiches for the hamshacha of the etzem de l'mayla in the etzem de l'mata, which will come later when one does the avodah of kol masacha yil Shem Shemaim and b'chol derech eyu. So this is what we have before we come to our Sicha. It is tzarech iyun ktsas in that sich in Chelek Gimel, because he does start off saying there on page 932 that the Adonim is the Bechina von Kabbalah Soil von Moida Ani. Which l'chayra there's no inyan of a kaiches pnimiyim. Everybody says Moida Ani. Even women, children say Moida Ani. Moida Ani is not only shaykh to Anoshim Gedolim. So he starts off saying how the Terumas Adonim is an inyan which is Kabbalah Soil of Moida Ani, like in Chelek Aleph. But then at the end of the Sikha, it seems like he's moving away from that pshat and explaining, as we said, that it's the idea of preparing the kaiches, whatever that means, preparing the kaiches for the hamshach of the etzem de la maila in the etzem de la mata, which comes through kol masacha ilu shem shemayim and b'chol archecha da'ayim. Now we come to our Sikha. So in our Sikha, the Rebbe also deals with the Terumas Adonim, as we said, and he begins in Ois Beis by pretty much going with the beard that he said in Chelek Aleph, that the Adonim, Terumas Adonim, is the avodah of Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil, and the Terumas HaMishkan, which was for everything else in the Mishkan, including the Kroshim and the Yeriyos, that is the avodah with Kaiches Pnimi. And then the Sikha goes on to ask the question which is really raised b'derech remez in Chelek Gimel. If that's the case, then why is it that Terumas HaAdonim was only given by Anoshim mi ben Chaf? Seemingly, if it's an avoid of Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil where everybody's b'shava, it should have been given by Anoshim Noshim v'Taf. That's the question that he asks in the Sikha. And al derech zeh he asks on the Terumas HaMishkan. The Terumas HaMishkan, we said in avodas l'chayra, is the avodah of Psukei de Zimra and Birchas Krishma and Krishma Shmeina Esrei, the avodah with the Kaiches Pnimiyim, where one's serving Hashem with their Seichel Amidus. And that's why there's his Chalkus. Each person gave Kefi Nidvas Liboy. It wasn't the same. Some gave Zov, some gave Tcheles, etc. Because this is the Kaiches Pnimiyim of Seichel Amidus, where everybody's different. So if that's the case, why there was it also given by Noshim V'Taf? If we're dealing with Kaiches Pnimiyim of Seichel Amidus, it's only B'Shleimus by Anoshim Gedolim. So who should have contributed to Terumas HaMishkan, which is the Seichel Amidus? Only Anoshim Gedolim. Why there is it also being given by Noshim V'Taf? This is the kasha that he asks. And so the Rebbe comes to a new hesber, which will be the fourth explanation in Terumas HaAdonim, and one which l'chayra answers all the questions in the best way. And the Rebbe explains what's Terumas HaAdonim ba'avodah. It's not hoidu and moida ani like it says in Chelek Aleph. It's not stam bittul v'Kabbalah Soil. Terumas HaAdonim in avodah is really, he says, Krishma and Tefillah. Kriyashma and Tefillah, this is Terumas HaAdonim. Why? Because the way it's supposed to be, Kriyashma and Tefillah, although one is utilizing their Kaiches Pnimiyim, their Seichel Amidus, but it's not meant to be Stam Kaiches Pnimiyim. It's supposed to be completely permeated and founded on the Kabbalah's oil, on the Bittul of Moida Ani and Hoida, which comes before. In other words, the Avodah of Kriyashma and Tefillah, the way it's supposed to be, is that it's a combination, it's a Shiluv, it's a Tivuch of both of these Avodas. It is the Avodah of Seichel Amidus, Kaiches Pnimiyim, but mitzad sheni, it's permeated with the Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil that one has before davening. And both of these together, doing Krishma and Tefillah in this way, combining both Avodas, this is the way it's supposed to be, and this is Terumas HaAdonim. And this explains why we find this Davar v'Hipuchai. Mitzad Echad, who gave it? Only on Noshim mi ben Chaf, not Noshim V'Taf. Why? Because we're dealing l'maisa with an avodah mitzad Seichel Amidus, with Kaiches Pnimiyim. And who is shaykh to Kaiches Pnimiyim, to Seichel Amidus, is on Noshim Gedolim, not Noshim V'Taf. But mitzad Sheni, who gave it? But mitzad Sheni, what was given? What was given was Machzis HaShekel, which is the same amount. Everybody gave the same amount. Why? Because since the avodah is permeated with Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil, in that, everybody's b'shaveh. So everybody gave the same amount of machzis hashekel. And we see this also in davening itself. Mitzad echad in davening, who is chayiv in Krishma Tefillah, he says, only anoshim gedolim. Noshim v'taf potter. Why? Because davening, krishma tefillah is something, it's an avodah, ezi avodah shebelevzu tefillah. This is an avodah with the koiches pnimim, and it's only shaykh to anoshim gedolim. But mitzad sheni, the nusach tefillah, the nusach of Kriyas Shema, the nusach of tefillah of Shemona Esrei is the same for everybody. Ha'oshel lo yarbe v'adal lo yamit. You can't add or change the nusach, it's the same nusach. Why? Because since the avodah is permeated with bittul v'kabbalas oil, in that everybody is b'shavah. He doesn't say this in the Sicha, but l'chayra lefi zeh, it's also understood why they had to give dafke kesef. Kesef, we said from the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, is milashon tshuka, milashon ava, milashon ritzaynus. But according to this Sicha, it's not the ritzaynus of the nefesh abahamis, it's not the tshuka in le'uma zeh, fakert. We're dealing with kesef dikdusha, ava dikdusha, tshuka dikdusha, because since we're dealing with krishma utfila, so this is an avodah of Ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol meidecha. This is an avodah of Avas Hashem. This is Kesef Dikdusha. That's the Terumas Ha'adanim. Not Moida Ani and Hoidu. It's Krishma. It's Avas Hashem. It's Kesef. But Im Kol Zeh, it's permeated and founded on Bittul v'Kabbalah soil, and therefore it's also the Terumas Ha'adanim. It's also an inyan of something which is b'shava by everybody. So that's l'chayra, the maila of the Sicha, that it explains all the pratim in a very geshmaka way. Explains why it's kesef. It explains why everybody gave the same. It explains why it's only shayach to anoshim gedolim, and everything makes perfect sense. Now, let's stop for a second and just compare this to Likkutei Sichos Chelek Aleph. In Chelek Aleph, what was the beer in the Terumas Ha'adanim? The beer was that it's Pashata Kabbalas oil. We'll say Kabbalas oil grade. Pure, Terukene Kabbalas oil, Maida Ani and Hoidu. No involvement of Kaiches Pnimim. That's how we explain Terumas Ha'adanim. Whereas in this Sicha, he's being Mechadish, that no, Terumas Ha'adanim is really Krishma Utfila, which is all about Kaiches Pnimim, yet permeated with Bittul v'Kabbalas oil. What's the machlekes here between these two sichos? What's changing? What's the difference? My benayu. So l'chayra, the chiluk is, was kabbalas oil, pure kabbalas oil, part of the Mishkan? Is pure and simple kabbalas oil, is that a chelek of the Mishkan or not? So in Chelek Aleph he says, yes, fakert, it's the aside of the Mishkan. The foundation of the Mishkan is the Adonim, is pure Kabbalas oil. That's the foundation. In Chelek Yud Aleph he's saying, no, pure Kabbalas oil, simple Kabbalas oil is not a part of the Mishkan. The aside of the Mishkan, which is the Adonim, is not pure simple Kabbalas oil. It's Kabbalas oil together with Kaiches Pnimim. It's Krishma Utfila. It's Avas Hashem. It's Seichel Umidas, permeated with Kabbalas oil. What's changing here? Why in Chelek Yud Aleph does the Rebbe not want to learn that the Terumas Ha'adanim, the Adonim are pure Kabbalas oil, besides for the question that he asks? Could be for another reason. What is the idea of the Mishkan? V'asili mikdash v'shachanti b'seicham b'seich kol echad ve'echad. The Eibishter wants to dwell within every person. And the Eibishter wants to dwell dir b'tachtainim b'toich mitzius ha'adam. The Eibishter wants to be within the person's mitzius. That is the idea of the Mishkan, making your mitzius a Mishkan for Hashem. So b'meile, in Chelek Yud Aleph, the Rebbe is taining that pure Kabbalas oil Greda, cannot be part of the Mishkan. Because pure Kabbalas oil, that comes b'zad ha'etzem ha'neshama, but pure Kabbalas oil, that's not the mitzius ha'adam. And the fact that everybody is b'shaveh in Kabbalas oil, in Bittul, in Shiflus, that there's absolutely no hischalkus between one person and the next, that itself is the proof that that's not the Metzias Ha'adam. The Metzias Ha'adam is his Kaiches Pnimiyim. That's the character of the person. That's the personality of the person. And according to the Sich in Chelek Yud Aleph, a Mishkan has to be v'shachanti b'seichem b'seich kol echad ve'echad. The Eibishter wants to dwell within your Metzias. So therefore, pure Kabbalas oil has no shaykhs to the Mishkan whatsoever. That comes before the Mishkan. But when we deal with the Mishkan itself, and building a Mishkan, The Mishkan only begins where the Metzias Ha'adam begins. And the Metzias Ha'adam begins with Koiches Pnimiyim. And that's why in this Sikha he learns that what are the Koiches Pnimiyim? What is Terumas Ha'adanim? Even the foundation of the Mishkan, it's Koiches Pnimiyim. It is the Metzias Ha'adam. Just Bazeh Gufa, it's not Stam the Metzias Ha'adam, it's the Metzias Ha'adam the way it's completely permeated with Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil. That's the Yesod. But Kabbalah Soil by itself, according to the Sikh in Chelek Yud Aleph, is not part of the Mishkan. There's a very Geshmake Ha'ara 46, where, based on the Chiddush of this Sikha here, he explains a beautiful Yerushalmi. There's Yerushalmi Shabbos Perek Zayin, where the Gemara thinks in the Hava Amina that binyan al gabe kelim have a binyan, and it wants to prove it from the fact that they built the krushim on top of the Adonim. The Adonim l'chayra are kelim, and the krushim they're building the krushim on top of the Adonim. So this seems to prove that binyan al gabe kelim on Shabbos is still considered binyan. And the Gemara answers no. Really, shiny Adonim the kekarkehei. The Adonim are not considered kelim. The Adonim are like karka. So the Rebbe says, according to this Sikha, the Gemara could be understood. If we're learning like he learns in the Likkutei Sichos Chelek Aleph and even Chelek Gimel, where Terumas Ha'adanim is just Kabbalah Soul by itself, so then what's the Havamina? For sure the Adonim are karka. V'nafshi ka'ofel akoltiya. Bittul, the idea of bittul is offer. So if the Adonim represent just plain bittul v'shiflus v'kabbalah soil, then of course the Adonim are kekarka. And the Hava Amina, to consider the Adonim kelim, and to prove that binyan al gabe kelim is called binyan, doesn't make any sense. But according to the Sikha, that what is Terumas Ha'adanim? The Adonim are not pasha to kabbalah soil. It's not stam kabbalah soil. Really the Adonim are koiches pnimiyim. It's Kriya Shema Tefillah. It's the person utilizing his Seichel Midas. Ubazeh Gufa permeated with Kabbalah soil. So therefore, the Havamin of the Gemara does make sense. Maybe we should consider the Adonim to be Begeder Kelim. Because Kelim is the idea of Koiches Pnimim. Koiches Pnimim Seichel Midas. This is like Kelim. And since the Adonim are an Aveda with Seichel Midas, we should consider them Kelim, and binyan al gabe kelim is binyan. That was the Gemara's Havamina. It only makes sense according to the Chiddush of this Sikha that Adonim is Krishma Tefillah. But the Gemara comes to the Maskan and says no. Although it's the Avodah B'Koiches Pnimiyim, although the Adonim is Krishma Tefillah Seichel Midas, but the key ingredient, the most important element, is the Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil. And because the Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil, which is permeating the Seichel Midas in Terumas Ha'adanim, is the key ingredient, so for that reason, we define the Adonim not as Kelim, but rather as Karka. And therefore there's no raya that Binyan al Gabe Kelim is called Binyan, because the Adonim are considered Karka. Despite the fact that they represent an Avodah B'Koiches Pnimiyim, but the key, the most important element is the Bittul v'Kabbalah Soil, and that makes them have a gather of karka, not a gather of kelim. So Ad Kan is the teichen of the Sikha. The Sikha also explains the idea of Terumas HaMishkan, the Nefesh Adam, which we are not going to deal with right now. Now I want to learn two ha'aras in the Sikha where there is an amazing chidushim in Nigla. And we're going to take these from the beginning and do them properly. The first ha'ara that we're going to learn is ha'ara 7. But to learn ha'ara 7 properly, even before I read it inside, we're going to start with a Rambam. So there's a Rambam in Hilchas Beis Abchira, Perek Aleph, Halacha Yud Beis. The Rambam says, Ein boinen es hamikdash b'layla, shenemer v'yom hakim es hamishkan b'yom mekimin loy b'layla. We do not build a Beis Hamikdash at night, as the pasuk says, v'yom hakim es hamishkan b'yom mekimin v'loy b'layla. V'oiskin b'binyan me'elois hashachar tesak echavim, and we can build from elois hashachar until tesak echavim. And now the Rambam adds a line. This is the key line over here. V'hakol chayovin livnois u'lesa'ed ba'atzmon u'v'mamoinam. Anoshim v'noshim k'mikdash hamidbar. When it comes to the binyan Beis Hamikdash, building the Beis Hamikdash, hakol chayovin, everybody is chayev livnois, to build and to help ba'atzmon uvemamaynom, anoshim v'noshim, kemikdash hamidbar, like it was in the Midbar. What's the makar of the Rambam? The Kesef Mishnah brings a psuk in Parshas Terumah, or Parshas Vayakel. D'chsiv vayavayu ha'anoshim al ha'anoshim, u'ksiv vayasik kol chachmei leiv, u'ksiv kol yisha chachmas leiv b'yodei ha'tovu. So just like by the Mishkan in the Midbar, we see that side the men, side the women, everybody participated. So Kemikdash HaMidbar, says the Rambam, same thing by the Beis HaMikdash. Hakal chayav and livnei sulasayid ba'atzmam ubemamaynom kemikdash HaMidbar. That's the Rambam. So the Achronim, many Achronim, ask two kashas on the Rambam. Kasha number one is, what's the makar of the Rambam? I mean, every Rambam has a makar somewhere in Chazal, a Bavli, a Yerushalmi, a Medrashim. The Rambam, though, is saying a halacha here which we don't find anywhere in Chazal. So yeah, the Kesef Mishnah brings psukim from Parshas Vayakel, but it's strange that the only makar to this is directly from Chumash, and there's nowhere in Torah Shebal Peh where this halacha is mentioned. And furthermore, one can ask, what kind of makar is it from the Mishkan? Who says that was a chiyuv for the Beis HaMikdash? That was the Mishkan. By the Mishkan, people gave. By Yavayu ha'anashim al anashim, could be even a sipur dvarim ba'alma. It's telling you what happened. Where do we see that that's bechal a chiyuv? And where do we see that that's a chiyuv for the Beis HaMikdash also? So that's the first kasha that they ask. What's the makar of this Rambam? What's the makar? And there are different suggestions to different gemaras, which bedoichak could be some kind of a makar for the Rambam, but there's no klora makar for the Rambam. So it seems to be a mechudesh dikadin that the Rambam was mamtzi on his own. That's one kasha. And then they ask the second question, which is a very strong question, that the Rambam is contradicting himself. In the beginning of the halacha, the Rambam said, what? Ein b'ynes hamikdash b'laylo, shenemar v'yoyim hakim, v'yoyim mekimin v'lay b'laylo. Which means that the mitzvah of binyan beis hamikdash is a mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Since you can only build a beis hamikdash by day and not by night, so it's a mitzvah sasei shazman grama, and women should be potter. So why does he say v'hakal chayovim livnei sulasayid anoshim v'noshim? Why are women chayiv in this mitzvah if it's a mitzvah which could be done only b'yoyim, and it's a mitzvah sasei shazman grama? This is the two kashas that are asked. And there are many suggestions that are given. I'm going to share with you two suggestions of the many. Two that I found to be very geshmak. One is the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover in Tzofnas Paneach on the Rambam, Sefer Haflah, page 107. The Rogatchover explains that there are two dinim in Binyan Beis HaMikdash. There's one din, mitzad the mitzvah sasei of Asilim Mikdash. The Rambam begins the beginning of Hilchas Beis HaBchira. The Rambam says, mitzvahs asay, livnois bayis laShem, shenemar v'asilim mikdash. So mitzvahs asay, one of the tayag mitzvahs, to build a Beis HaMikdash. So that's one din in Binyan Beis HaMikdash, mitzad the mitzvahs asay of v'asilim mikdash. But then, says the Rogatchover, there's another din. And that din is nista'ef from the chiyuv of karbanos. There is a chiyuv to bring karbanos. And in order to be able to bring karbanos, you need to have a bayis muchan in which to bring the karbanos. So that requires a Beis HaMikdash to facilitate the bringing of karbanos. So it's two different dinim. And he says there could be an afkamina between them. There are some parts of the Binyan Beis HaMikdash which might not be ma'akiv karbanos, but are still necessary mitzvah the first mitzvah of Asilim Mikdash. For example, he gives an example by the Mishkan. The Mishkan had 3 layers of Yeriyos. If the upper layer blew up by the wind and folded over, he brings a makar that the Mishkan is still kosher for bringing karbanos. However, the Mishkan is not bishleimus. Mitzad the mitzvah of Asilim Mikdash, you have to have the Mishkan bishleimus, and you have to put the Yeriyah back. So we see that there are some chalokim in the Mishkan Beis HaMikdash which are required only mitzad v'asilim mikdash, not mitzad the need to bring karbanos, and maybe there's also dinim fakert. But al kaponim, these are the two dinim in Binyan Beis HaMikdash. So the Rogatchover says with this, the Rambam could be understood. The mitzvahs asay of asili migdash, the first din, the mitzvahs asay livnois bayis lashem, that's take mitzvahs asay shazman groma, and on that the Rambam says, ein bainis hamigdash ele b'yoyim. That mitzvah can only be done b'yoyim v'loy b'layla. And in that, women are potter. However, mitzad the second din of the chiyuv to bring karbonos, which in this even women have to bring karbonos, a yeledes, a nida, a zava, women have to bring karbonos also. So, mitzad the chiyuv to bring karbonos, women also have to build a Beis HaMikdash. And that's the hemshech of the Rambam, v'hakal chayav and livnois on the side, v'atzmam u'b'mamoinam, anoshim v'noshim. The chiyuv of noshim doesn't stem from the mitzvah of asili migdash, rather it stems from the chiyuv to bring karbonos, which necessitates a Beis HaMikdash. And that could be done also b'layla. If you're building a Beis HaMikdash out, a place to be makiv karbonos, that could be done b'layla. So that's how the Rogatchover wants to explain the stira. That's one teretz. Again, as for the mocker of the Rambam, he points to a Gemara in Bava Basra, where the Gemara seems to suggest that avodim have a chiv in binyan Beis HaMikdash, and if avodim are chayiv, so then also noshim should be chayiv. That's what he wants to say. But al kaponim, that's how he explains it. There's another answer given in Achronim based on the Turah Yevon. The Turah Yevon is explaining the Gemara in Kiddushin, where the Gemara says that a woman is potter from giving her son a bris. A father has a chiyuv to give his son a bris, but a mother is potter, and the Gemara brings a pasuk, how we know a mother is potter. So Tosfos there asks, who needs a pasuk? Typically, davar mitzvah say shazman grama. Since giving a bris is only b'yoyim v'loy b'laylo, so it's a mitzvah say shazman grama, a woman a potter. So of course she doesn't have to give her son a bris. That's the kasha of Tosfos. So the Turah Yevon explains there a very important distinction. That when we have a mitzvah which is b'yoyim v'loy b'laylo, we have to understand what's the night, what's the Laila doing? Is the Laila mafsik or is the Laila mevatel? For example, by tefillin. So you have to put on tefillin b'yoyim v'loy b'layla. Once the night comes, what does the night do? The night is mevatel, meaning the mitzvah of putting on tefillin today there's a mitzvah. This mitzvah ends tonight. Once tonight comes, the mitzvah is over. The Laila is mevatel the mitzvah. What about tomorrow? Tomorrow, the mitzvah to put on tefillin is a new mitzvah. It's not the same mitzvah as yesterday. It's a new chiyuv. The chiyuv is mischadesh. The mitzvah is mischadesh tomorrow and the next day. So, the mitzvah is taka oni b'yoyim, but the mitzvah is every day for that day. And when the day ends, the laila is mevatel the mitzvah, and tomorrow starts a new mitzvah. Whereas Mila, the Turah Yevon says, is different. There's no mitzvah to have a bris every day. There's a mitzvah to have a bris one time. Person has a chiyuv to have a bris. That's it. It's a one-time chiyuv. You can only fulfill that mitzvah by day. So if I didn't do the mitzvah today, and now comes Laila, what's the Laila doing? The Laila isn't mevatel the mitzvah, it's mafsik. It's putting the mitzvah on hold until tomorrow. Come tomorrow morning, it's not that now there's a new chiyuv of Mila. No, the same chiyuv of Mila, the same mitzvah of Mila from yesterday, is now chayzer v'niyar, comes back. So all the night did, the Laila just put it on hold. The same mitzvah continues forever and ever until you actually have a bris. And as the mitzvah continues, as the mitzvah is nimshach, on and on, the Laila is mafsik. The Laila puts it on hold. But come the next day, there's no new chiyuv, or there's no new mitzvah, rather it's the same mitzvah coming back. So he wants to say that when a woman potter from a mitzvah sasei shazman groma, only when the Laila is mevatel, like tefillin. And the next day starts a new mitzvah. But when the Laila is only mafsik like Mila, and the next day it's really the same mitzvah from yesterday coming back, so in essence the mitzvah continues forever, the Laila is just mafsik. In those mitzvahs, even a woman is chayiv. And therefore, we would have thought that a woman does have a chayiv to give her son a bris, and she's not potter mitzad mitzvah say shazman grama, and I need the pasuk that the Gemara brings to say she's potter. So, based on this svara, we could apply the same thing to binyan Beis HaMikdash. The chiyuv of binyan Beis HaMikdash is not a new chiyuv every day. There's no mitzvah to build a Beis HaMikdash every day. It's a one-time chiyuv, build a Beis HaMikdash. Norva then, you can do it b'yoyim v'loy b'layla. So what's the nature of Laila? The nature of Laila is that it's mafsik. It puts the mitzvah on hold. But when tomorrow comes, not pshat that we have a new chiyuv, a new mitzvah of binyan Beis Hamikdash. No, the same mitzvah, the same chiyuv from yesterday is chayzer v'nir, comes back, and we're continuing the chiyuv from yesterday. So b'meila, in such a mitzvah, a woman would be chayiv. It's not a mitzvah asay shazman grama. And therefore, the Rambam says, Hakal chayavim livnoi salasayid anoshim v'noshim. That's another answer. And like I said, there are many other answers given. But now we're going to look at the ha'ara of the Rebbe, and we're going to see how the way the Rebbe learns this Rambam, it completely answers both questions. Not answers the questions. It shows how the two questions, side the question of what's the makar of the Rambam, and side the question of mitzvahs asay shazman grama, don't even begin. Because the Rebbe has a mechudesh pshat in the Rambam, which I don't believe anybody else says. So, ha'ara 7. What does it say in the prim of the Sicha? In the prim of the Sicha, the Rebbe is talking about the 3 different Terumas that were given. There was Terumas shkolim. Let's do it inside. Terumas shkolim shidatzorach karbonos. They gave machzis hashekel for karbonos. Hayatzivu l'shaitoi, or mitzvahs asay l'doyrus. So that machzis hashekel that was given for karbonos was a tzivui l'shaitoi, and it's also a mitzvah asay l'doyrus, one of tayag mitzvahs that every year the Yidden had to give machzis hashekel for karbonos tzivui. That's the first one. Mashenk in Terumas ha'adonim. Now listen carefully. Terumas ha'adonim. Shechiyuva haya rak koidem lebinyan hamishkan. Terumas ha'adonim was only a tzivui l'shaitoi, koidem lebinyan hamishkan. Never applied ever again. It was a one-time chiyuv, Likkutei Terumah for the adonim before the mishkan. And then he concludes that Terumas haklolis the hamishkan, and the last Terumah was the Terumah klolis for the mishkan, which is all the tesvav dvarim, zav, kesef, nechoshes, etc. That this one shehoisa rak koidem lebinyan hamishkan ubeis hamikdash. Keyword here, ubeis hamikdash. So the Rebbe is saying that the Terumas HaMishkan, which is the third of the Terumas, in which Me'ez Kolish Asher Yidvenu Liboy Tikchu Es Terumasi Zov Kesef Nechoshes Tcheles Argam Tel Hashani Sheish Izim B'Yisraelim Adamim, all the tests of Dvarim that were given for the Mishkan, this, in the Lashon of the Sicha, was a Chiyuv Haya Rak Koidem Lebinyan HaMishkan Ubeis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe is saying here a Moira Dike Chiddush. A Moira Dike Chiddush. That I think is not the way we learn B'Pashtus. That the Chiyuv to give Terumah in Parshas Terumah, V'yikrali Terumah, Parshas Terumah, giving Zav, Kesef, Nechoshes, this Tzivui, this Parsha was not only being stated L'Shaitai for the Mishkan, but it was also being said for the Beis HaMikdash. Meaning that when the Beis HaMikdash was being built, the Yidden were Mechuyev in Parshas Terumah, Parshas V'yikrali Terumah, which is this week's parsha, which describes the Yidden giving truma for the Mishkan. That is a chiyuv. That chiyuv is binding even for binyan Beis Hamikdash, not the adonim, but the rest of the tesvav dvarim. That was binding not just for the Mishkan, also for the Beis Hamikdash. What's the makar? Where does the Rebbe get this from? Where does the Rebbe take this from? That there's a chiyuv by binyan Beis Hamikdash is a chiyuv of a yikhuli truma as stated in Parshas Terumah. So the Rebbe says, Rambam Hilchos Beis Habchira Perek Aleph Halacha Yud Beis. What's the makar of the Sicha? Our Rambam Halacha Yud Beis. What does it say? Hakal Chayav and Livnei Sulasayid Batzmam Ubemamaynom Anoshim V'Noshim Kemikdash Hamidbar. Meaning, how's the Rebbe learning Pshat? The Rebbe is learning Pshat that the Rambam is talking about Hakal Chayav and Livnei Sulasayid. He's talking about a chiyuv which comes mitzad Parshas V'yikrali Terumah. And this is where the Rebbe is learning different from everybody else. Everybody else is learning that the Rambam is talking about the chiyuv mitzad binyan Beis Hamikdash. There's a mitzvah asay v'asali migdash v'shachanti b'soicham. As the Rambam said, mitzvah asay livnei b'ayis l'Hashem. And the Rambam is dealing with that chiyuv. And about that he says, Hakal Chayavim Livnei Sulasayid. In binyan Beis Hamikdash, everybody's mechuyev. And b'meila they all ask the questions. It's a mitzvah say shazman grama. What's the mocker? Comes the Rebbe says no. The Rambam isn't saying a halacha mitzad the mitzvah v'asili mikdash, the mitzvah of binyan Beis Hamikdash. No, The Rambam is learning that Parshas Terumah, V'yikhuli Terumah, was at Sivoy on Binyan Beis HaMikdash also. So b'meila, when it comes to build the Beis HaMikdash, Hakal Chayovin Livnoi Solasayid V'atzmam Ubemamayinam Alts Parshas V'yikhuli Terumah. Not Alts Mitzvahs V'asuli Mikdash. No, Alts Chiyuv V'yikhuli Terumah. And b'meila, there's no kasha for mitzvah seishas man grama. Why? Because in Hachanami, the mitzvah of binyan beis hamikdash of asili mikdash is take b'yoyim v'loy balayla, and that could be the mitzvah seishas man grama, and could be woman or potter in Hachanami. But now we're not dealing with that. Besides for the mitzvah of asili mikdash, there's another distinct chiyuv, another separate chiyuv that stems from Parshas Terumah v'yikhuli Terumah. That according to the Rambam, the chiyuv of giving truma, the tesvav dvarim that were given in this week's parsha, is also a tzivoy for the Beis HaMikdash. So b'meila, in that, everybody is chayiv. As we see that women participated in Parshas Terumah, so in the Beis HaMikdash also, that mitzvah is on the woman. Binyan Beis HaMikdash is a mitzvah seishas man grama, that's something else. Now we're not dealing with mitzvahs binyan Beis HaMikdash, now we're dealing with mitzvahs, or not mitzvahs. We're dealing with the chiyuv of v'yikhuli terumah. Now, what's the mocker of the Rambam? Where did the Rambam get this from? How did the Rambam know that Parshas Terumah was not just a chiyuv for then, b'shaiti for the Mishkan, but it was also a chiyuv that's going to come again by binyan Beis HaMikdash? How did the Rambam know this? So the Rebbe goes on in Ha'ara 7. U'b'yalka shemoyni kan v'zoysa terumah v'goymer melamed shar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'moishe gimel terumos Mishkan chulu mikdash aleph chulu sheni shenemar zav kesef v'nachayshes avo b'medrash hagadol kan v'lo manemar truma trumasi binyan echad ela achas l'mishkan v'achas l'mikdash rishon v'achas l'mikdash sheni. So the Rebbe is pointing us to a medrash b'feirosh hachazal. What better mocker do you need? This is a medrash hagadol, and the medrash says truma 3 times. Why does it say truma 3 times? Achas l'mishkan, achas l'mikdash rishon, achas l'mikdash sheni. This is the mocker of the Rambam. The Rambam has a mocker in the Medrash HaGadol that Parshas Terumah was a tzivoy not only the shaitai, it was a tzivoy for then, for the Mikdash Rishon, and for the Mikdash Sheni. And b'meila, when it came time to build the Beis HaMikdash, the Yidden were mitzuvah, they were mechuyev in Parshas Terumah v'yikhuli Terumah. And who is mechuyev in Parshas v'yikhuli Terumah? Anoshim v'noshim, everybody, hakol chayavim. And it has nothing to do with the mitzvah of binyan Beis HaMikdash, al tzvasili mikdash. This is a separate chiyuv. This is the amazing Chiddush of the Rebbe. Now he goes on. V'lechayre miloshen Rambam mashma dekol echad ve'achas haya mechuyev l'sayeye b'binyan Beis HaMikdash. From the Rambam's lashon hakol chayavin, it sounds like kol echad ve'achas haya mechuyev. Every single individual was mechuyev l'sayeye b'binyan Beis HaMikdash v'al derech shehaya b'mishkan shebazeh gam trumas ha'adonim v'lav dafke nediv leiv v'lechayra zehu chidush gadol. So it's a little bit not so clear what he's saying over here, but I think the Rebbe is trying to say like this. If we look at the chiyuv of v'yikhuli terumah by the Mishkan, what does the pasuk say? Me'eis v'yikhuli terumah me'eis kol ish asher yidvenu li by tikches terumasi. Meaning, seemingly, there was no chiyuv on every single person in the third Terumah of Terumas HaMishkan, which men, women, and children all gave, but there wasn't an absolute chiyuv on every single individual to give. Kol nediv leiv gave, but it wasn't a chiyuv al kol echad v'achas. But the Adonim, Terumas HaAdonim, that was an absolute chiyuv. Every single Jew had to give machzis hashekel for Terumas HaAdonim. So it comes out that the Rambam is kind of pulling from both sides. When he creates the chiyuv of v'yikhuli terumah al kaponim by the Beis HaMikdash, the Rambam is saying that it has characteristics of both. On one hand, every single individual is chayiv, like by Terumas HaAdonim, where it wasn't only up to kol nediv leiv. It wasn't optional. It wasn't only for those feeling generous. The Adonim, everybody had to give. So the Rambam is pulling from there, and he's saying likewise, when it comes to the hakol chayov and livnei solasayid batzmam ubemamayinam, it has the characteristic of Terumas HaAdonim that every single person is mechuyev to do it. But mitzad sheni, Terumas ha'adanim was only the men. Here, even the women are chayiv, because like we see by the Terumas HaMishkan, the rest of the things that were given, Zav, Kesef, Nachoshes, there the women gave also. So when you pull both together, it comes out that there is an absolute chiyuv on every individual to participate in the Yikholi Terumah for the Mishkan and for the Beis HaMikdash, and that's why the Rambam says, Hakol chayav and kol echad va'achas. But the Rebbe concludes, V'lachayr zeh Chiddush gadol. It's still a Chiddush gadol. Because if we're comparing it to Terumas ha'adanim, so only men should have to give. And if we're comparing it to Terumas HaMishkan, where the women and children gave also, so then it should be only kol nediv leiv. It shouldn't be an absolute chiyuv al kol echad va'achas. To combine both, that every single person is chayiv, like the Adonim aspect, and even women are chayiv, like the Terumas HaMishkan aspect, that is where the Rambam seems to be making a Chiddush Gadol. The Rebbe is not saying it as a question, he's just pointing out that it is a Chiddush Gadol. Okay. Then the Hora goes on, okay. V'oid lahoyer, asher binyan beis hamikdash, hi miha-mitzvahs she'Hashem, shehem chayv al hatzibur, lo kol ish ve'ish, and he brings two Maramakaimah, Sefer HaMitzvahs, and also Sefer HaChinuch. So what's he saying at the end? That the mitzvah, that binyan beis hamikdash is a mitzvah shehem chayv al hatzibur, lo kol ish ve'ish. And he says, v'oid lahoyer. So what's the oid lahoyer? How does that play into our discussion here? So I think that what the Rebbe is trying to say is as follows. The mitzvah of binyan beis hamikdash, mitzad va'asuli mikdash, which is a mitzvah saseh, as we said, a mitzvah saseh, livnois bayis l'Hashem v'asuli mikdash, that mitzvah isn't a mitzvah al kol ish ve'ish. Every single person doesn't have to build a beis hamikdash. The mitzvah is chal on the tzibur, as a klal. The tzibur as a klal is mechuyev in this mitzvah. And therefore what? He says, v'oid lahoyer. So I think, could be what he means to say is, this ties very much into what we were saying before. Because if we learned the Rambam, like the other Achronim learned, that the Rambam Hakol Chayav and Livnoi Sulasaid is mitzvah the mitzvah v'asili migdash, the mitzvah of binyan beis hamikdash, then there would be another problem with the Rambam. What do you mean Hakol Chayavin? How can you say Hakol Chayavin that there's a chiv al kol ish ve'ish if the mitzvah of binyan beis hamikdash is only on the tzibur, only on the klal? But according to what we said before, it's ganz verstandig. When the Rambam says Hakal Chayavin livnei sulasayid, he's not dealing with the mitzvah of asuli mikdash, as we said. He's dealing with the chiyuv mitzad v'yikholi Terumah. Parshas Terumah is machayiv them. So therefore, there's no problem. Yes, in Achanami, the binyan beis hamikdash, the mitzvah of asuli mikdash is a chiyuv only on the tzibur. But here, every individual is chayiv livnei sulasayid ba'atzmam ubemamayinam, because we're not coming mitzad the pasuk of asuli mikdash. We're coming mitzad the pasuk of V'yikholi Terumah, and in V'yikholi Terumah, every single individual is chayiv. The Chiddush that the Rebbe pointed out, Zeh Chiddush Gadol, that the Rambam made it a chiyuv al kol ish ve'ish, al kol echad va'achas, that every single person is mechuyev, not only the nediv leiv. That seems to be a problem. But at least we're better off. We wouldn't be helping ourselves by saying, since the Rambam says that every single person is mechuyev here, not just the nediv leiv, that proves that it's not mitzad v'yikholi Terumah. That has to prove that it's mitzad v'asili mikdash. It wouldn't help, because even mitzad v'asili mikdash, it's still not al kol echad v'achas. It's still only on the tzibur. So at least this way we're better off saying it's not mitzad v'asili mikdash. It's mitzad v'yikholi Terumah. There is a Chiddush Gadol in the Rambam that it's al kol echad v'achas, but the Rambam is ganz verstandig. So this is the first ha'ara that I wanted to learn, and I think this is a tremendous chiddush. Okay, we're going to learn one more ha'ara, and that is going to be ha'ara 40. With this we'll conclude. So in ha'ara 40, the Sichos is talking about the Chiyuv of Talmud Torah, and in the Sichos it says, "Harei etzem Chiyuv the Talmud Torah mutal al kol bnei Yisrael." The Chiyuv of Talmud Torah is on everybody, men for sure. Gam anoshim chayaves lilmod has halachis hatzriches lahen. It's also on women. And then he says, "V'gam benegel liktanim harei mitzvah min haTorah al ha'av lelamdes bnei haKatan Torah." That the Chiyuv of Talmud Torah is mutal also on a katan, because harei mitzvah min haTorah al ha'av l'lamed es b'nai ha'katan Torah. So in Orah 40, he brings the Maramakim. Where do we see that it's a mitzvah saseh? Mitzvah min ha-Torah, alo av, l'lamed es b'nai ha'katan Torah. He says, Hilchas Talmud Torah ad marazakim b'tchilasa. Ma'she'en kin chiyuv ha'av l'chanchi b'mitzvahs, yirak midivrei seifrim. The chiyuv chinuch by all other mitzvahs is only midrabanan. Okay. Now he asks a question. Bav shebenegel Talmud Torah he mitzvah saseh alo av ha'katan ein chayiv. Chayra. Very simple question. The chiyuv is on the father. The father is chayiv to teach his son. There's no chiyuv on the katan himself. But in the Sichos, he's trying to say that the chiyuv of Talmud Torah is mutal al kol b'nei Yisrael, and noshim, and also ktanim. How do we see that it's mutal on ktanim? It's mutal al ha'av, l'lamed es b'nai, but it's not mutal on the katan himself. That's the question. So he answers in the ha'ara, harei ha'mitzvah hi shehaben yargil atzmei likris b'Torah. The answer is that the mitzvah is shehaben yargil atzmei likris b'Torah. And then he says in parentheses, or Eila El, Amud 44, Shuli Hagilion Ha'alef L'Ha'ara 19. That's the end of the Ha'ara. So what I want to do now is just to explain the answer here, and to go through with you what does it say, Take, on page 44, the Shuli Hagilion to Ha'ara 19. So that's what we're going to go through right now. So once again, we're going to start with the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchas Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Gimel, and the Rambam says, "Misha lo limdei aviv chayiv lelamed es atzmei k'sheyakir." Person whose father didn't teach him Torah, he's chayiv lelamed es atzmei k'sheyakir. The child has to teach himself k'sheyakir. That's the lashon of the Rambam. Now, the lashon here is a little bit not understood. What does he mean? Chayiv l'lamed es atzmei k'sheyakir. What does it mean k'sheyakir? He should say k'sheyagdil. But the truth is that all of the Achronim who talk about this still understand the Rambam that he means k'sheyakir k'sheyagdil, because they can't imagine that there's a chiyuv on a katan to learn himself when he's a katan. Katan is pater mikol mitzvahs. There's no way to entertain a chiyuv on a katan. So what the Rambam means to say is, if the father didn't teach him, then he's chayiv to teach himself, k'sheyakir meaning k'sheyagdil. When he becomes a gadol, he has to teach himself. But kol zman he's a katan, there cannot be a chiyuv on him to teach himself. Azoy Lertman, the Rambam, and there's nobody that suggests otherwise, besides for the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek has in Piskei Dinim Chidushim al Rambam towards the back, and there the Tzemach Tzedek learns pshat in the Rambam like this. It says L'kamon din gimel kosav chayiv l'lamed es atzmei k'sheyakir. Quotes the Rambam, and he says miyu yesh laimar kevan the Talmud Torah lo yidami l'shar mitzvahs the b'shar mitzvahs eino av mechuyev l'chanech b'nei midei raisa ela midivrei sofer ava b'Talmud Torah mechuyev av midei raisa l'ilmud es b'noi im kein shema gam ala kotan yashchiv midei raisa. So the Tzemach Tzedek says that the pshat in the Rambam k'sheyakir, he's saying it b'derech efsher, but he's saying the pshat in the Rambam k'sheyakir is take while he's a kotan. What the Rambam is saying is, if the father didn't teach the son, then k'sheyakir, even als kotan. But if he's k'sheyakir, he's chayiv lelamed es atzmai, and it's a chiv midei raisa. And the Tzemach Tzedek gives a shtickle explanation. What's the explanation? That since there's a difference between the mitzvah of Talmud Torah to any other mitzvah, that by all other mitzvahs, the chiyuv of chinuch is only midirabanan. The father has a chiyuv midirabanan to teach his son. But midiraisa, there's no chiyuv at all. But when it comes to Talmud Torah, the father is mechuyev min ha-Torah to teach the son. So therefore, from this we can derive that shema gam ala kotan yesh chiyuv midiraisa. That's the Tzemach Tzedek. So it's not so understood what exactly is the reason here. What's the connection? Just because the father is mechuyev midei raisa to teach him, why does that mean that all of a sudden there's a chiyuv on the katan himself? Why doesn't the chiyuv stay on the father? Okay, call it a chiyuv midei raisa, but it's on the father. And if the father didn't do his chiyuv, okay, he didn't do his chiyuv. But how do we get from there to a chiyuv on the son, on the katan himself, even als katan, L'lamed es atzmai, and it's a chiyuv min ha-Torah. So in the Likkutei Sichos, Chelek Yud Zayin, Parshas Kedoshim, Sichos Daled, page 238, the Rebbe quotes the Tzemach Tzedek, and he explains like this: Yeshleimer HaPirush, V'baldas is do achiv v'deiraisa mitzadem av. After Maise ha-limud von Koton, hat sein Limud a-geder von Chiyuv. Und der Rieber b'shas, as loi lomdei aviv, bleibt do achiv mitzad Torah. So the Rebbe is explaining, Pshat, that since there's a chiyuv mideiraisa mitzad the father, since the father has a chiyuv mideiraisa to teach his son, so what does that mean? That the Maise ha-limud of the Koton has the geder of chiyuv mideiraisa. The Torah recognizes, the Torah itself, the Deiraisa level recognizes some gather of chiyuv on the Maise halimud of the Koton. Since the father is mechuyev to teach the son min ha-Torah, so that means the learning of the son is recognized by the Torah as having some gather of chiyuv. If the Torah was totally dismissive of the Maise halimud of the Koton, it wouldn't be shaykh to say the father is mechuyev to teach him min ha-Torah. The moment you say the father is mechuyev to teach the Koton min ha-Torah, that means the Torah is machshiv, the Torah is mischashev with the Maise halimud of the Koton and recognizes it on a Deiraisa level. So this is the pshat in the Tzemach Tzedek, and therefore, from the chiyuv that the father has to teach the son, from that is mista'if, a chiyuv on the Koton himself, that in a case where the father didn't teach him, the son himself, the Koton himself, has a chiyuv in Deiraisa. And in the Ha'ara, he connects us to the fact that a Deiraisa is chal on the chefza. A Derabanan, we know, is not necessarily chal on the chefza, whereas a Deiraisa is. So in this case, the father has the chiyuv to teach. The chefza is the son. I'm saying this bekitzur because we're getting short on time, but you can look it up. But since the father has a chiyuv mideiraisa to teach the son, so the father is mekayim the mitzvah in the chefza, which is the son. And since a chiyuv deiraisa is chal on the chefza, so there is a chalois gather of chiyuv on the ma'isa limud of the Koton, mitzad the father's chiyuv to teach him, which is a chiyuv mideiraisa. This is the Chiddush of the Tzemach Tzedek, and in the Sicha, earlier, that same Sicha, Parshas Kedoshim, in Ha'ara 17, the Rebbe explains that this is actually the Shita of the Alter Rebbe also in Hilchos Talmud Torah, that the Alter Rebbe agrees with the Rambam, the way that Tzemach Tzedek learns, that there is a chiyuv on a Koton to learn Torah, a chiyuv min ha-Torah on the Koton. And this is an amazing Chiddush. It's the only time we find midairaisa a chiyuv on a Koton. A Koton himself has a chiyuv to learn Torah. In a case where his father didn't teach him, the Torah placed a chiyuv, the iraisa, on the Koton keshayakir to teach himself. Okay, let's come back to our Sicha. So now, when it comes to our Sicha, and we were learning Ha'ara 40, that Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe only brings in the parentheses at the end when he says Re'ele el Amud 44 Shali Hagilim. It seems like in the line before, the Rebbe wants to answer his question even lulei the Tzemach Tzedek. Even without the Tzemach Tzedek's Chiddush, our question could still be answered. What was our question? Our question was, how could the Sichos say that the Chiyuv of Talmud Torah is mutal on a Koton when it's really only mutal on the father, l'lamed es benai? So according to the Tzemach Tzedek, according to the Rambam, and according to the Alter Rebbe, it's sicher nicht kein kasha. Because there is a chiyuv mutal on a Koton midairaisa to learn Torah. The father is chayiv to teach him, but if the father doesn't teach him, the Koton has his own independent chiyuv. It stems from the father's chiyuv, but from there is derived, comes out the chiyuv on the Koton himself to learn Torah. So according to the Tzemach Tzedek, what it says in the Sichos is for sure. For sure makes sense. But in the line before, he wants to also answer the kasha even without the Chiddush of the Tzemach Tzedek. Even if we say that there's no chiyuv on a Koton. No way. A Koton is not chayiv to learn Torah. And kishayakir means kishayagdil. Even if we say that. Kolzman is a Koton, he's potter. And he only has a chiyuv kishayagdil. Still, our question could be answered. Why? Because the Rebbe says, meaning, true, it's the father. It's the father's chiyuv. The father has a chiyuv l'lamed es benai. And there's no chiyuv on the Koton. It's only a chiyuv on the father. But what is the chiyuv on the father? The chiyuv on the father is to teach his son. to the point she'aben yargil atzmai likros b'Torah. So therefore, included in the father's chiyuv is that the son has to learn. Meaning, this is not something that the father has the power to do on his own. Something like Milo, Pidin Haben, it's completely in the control of the father. He could do the mitzvah. He doesn't need any involvement of the son. The father does it. The son is the chefza in which the father is doing his mitzvah, but there's no hishtatvus, there's no pu'ula that the son needs to do by Milo, Pidin Haben. Mashenkin by Chiyuv, by Talmud Torah, even though the Chiyuv is mutal only on the father. It's his Chiyuv l'lamed es banoi, but he needs the son's participation here. If the son won't learn, if the son doesn't come to a point, ad sheyargil atzmoi likros b'Torah, the father hasn't done his Chiyuv. So true, it's not like the Tzemach Tzedek who says there's an actual Chiyuv on the son. The Chiyuv is on the father. But the father's Chiyuv includes that the son also must learn. The father cannot do this on his own. When the Torah placed the Chiyuv on the father, that the father needs to teach the son, the Torah was Bal Korchach, including here that the son needs to learn. So granted, the son is not learning out his own Chiyuv. The son is only learning out the father's Chiyuv to teach him. But since the father needs the son also to learn, in order for him to have fulfilled his Chiyuv, so the moment the father is chayiv l'lamed es benoi, included in that is the fact that a son needs to learn. So just to make it crystal clear, the nafkamina between the Tzemach Tzedek and the answer in the Ha'ara is, according to the Tzemach Tzedek, when a katan learns Torah, could be he's learning, not could be, when a son learns Torah, in a sense he's being mekayim the chiyuv that's on him. There's a chiyuv on the katan himself, midiraisa, to learn Torah. And when a katan learns, he's learning out his own chiyuv. Mashenkin, according to the answer that the Rebbe gives before the parentheses, he's learning even if we don't say that, even if the son's learning doesn't have a geder chiyuv b'fnei atzmai. The son's learning is only kechelek of the chiyuv that the father has to teach him, but nichlal in that, included in the father's chiyuv to teach the son, a Bal Korchach has to include that the son has to learn, because if the son doesn't learn, the father isn't doing his job. So b'meila, what it says in the Sicha, that the chiyuv of Talmud Torah is mutal al kol b'nei Yisrael, even on katanim, is true. There's a chiyuv of Talmud Torah mutal on a katan, granted not out his own chiyuv, but included within the chiyuv that the father has to teach him, is included in that Bal Korchach that the katan has to learn Torah. And again, for sure, if you bring in the Tzemach Tzedek, for sure the Sicha makes sense, because the katan has his own chiyuv, his own independent chiyuv. It's not just that he has a chelek within the father's chiyuv.